Okay. All right. So these are some really good questions. Thank you for those. Very good questions. So I basically choose, I just go come first, serve first, kind of. So this was the first, and I just went along the order. So the first question is, in relation to an individual in the human realm, when does he or she start to impute? Is it when the first conceptual thought arises? Is it when he or she is a baby, or when he or she first learns the language to express and to name objects? Okay. So basically, the first moment of labeling, when do we first label? And we associate labeling very strongly with language. So in this case, allow me to answer another person's question, which came later, but it relates to that. Do you need language to label? Okay. Actually, we use language to describe labeling, because I can only talk about it to you using language. So I make it sound as if you need always language. But that is not the case. Because even before you learn language, or even if you don't know the name for something, you use some symbol to refer to it. Okay? So as children, I don't think we remember the time when we didn't know language, but we certainly know times when we hear about something, we don't have a word for it, and we can still think about it. There's maybe a picture of the image, like an image of what it looks like appears to the mind. If I ask you, think of your own mother. There's an appearance of your mother to the mind, isn't there? She's not in front of you. So it may be the word mother, but it may also just be what you associate with your mother. So you have, therefore, a concept by way of an image that helps you to get at it. Okay? And in that moment you label, even without using a language. So I've been personally very interested in this whole thing of labeling and using language when you learn, or when you think. Because when I had to learn Tibetan, around that time, there was only one book available to learn Tibetan. And my teachers who taught me Tibetan, I was teaching them back English. They would teach me Tibetan because they also wanted to learn. So we had exchange classes. And they would take this Tibetan book of mine and look at a sentence and go, "We don't say that," and cross it out. And then I went to the next sentence. "Oh, we don't say that either," and cross it out. So I had a book full of crossed out sentences. So it was really hard to really know what Tibetans really said. And they were not used to having people around who spoke just a few words of Tibetan. So they were not like inviting me into their homes. "Let's have a conversation with your 5 words of Tibetan." So therefore I had a hard time initially to pick up Tibetan. And so I made myself think in Tibetan. Instead of thinking in German or in English, I made myself think in Tibetan. So that would take a while sometimes. Need to go to the bathroom. How do you say that? So before I went, I looked it up, I formulated the sentence, and I thought in that language. So I noticed that sometimes I think in a particular language, but sometimes I don't. I don't always think in a particular language. So this would apply also to other living beings, such as animals, which may have a certain symbolic that we're just not aware of. Whether it's such a sophisticated language as ours is to be seen. But as we've heard during the second lesson, I read you this article about how linguistics determine the way we think and the way we see reality. We talked about it yesterday a little bit, how French is a male, how the sun in French is a male object versus in German it's female. So my sense of the sun is a female object and the moon is male, but in French it's the other way around. So because the word grammatically is male or female, your sense of the object is different. In English it falls away because you don't have male or female. The nouns are basically neutral, I suppose. So those are just some examples where the language determines your way of thinking. But that being the case, even without language, there is a way in which you think about things. And in answer to this particular question, I think we do it all the time. We did it in our previous life, and we go on to use labeling, to use thoughts to refer to our world, our experiences. And that is not something we start at some point as babies. We're born with this. So a sense of, we know where to get our mother's milk. We know so what we call instinct in science, for instance, I think is because we've done it over and over in the past. So basically it's also, of course, the brain we're born with, certain brain, once we're grow in our mother's womb, that also determines what thoughts we can have. It's an interdependent relationship between brain and mind. But there's definitely thinking already, except we just don't remember. But big deal, I don't remember what I thought last week. I don't remember what I had for lunch a month ago. So of course we forget all this, but that doesn't mean it didn't take place. So I think it takes place even while we sleep, but it's just subtler levels of awareness that while we're awake, we may not necessarily recollect. So there's this whole science about what the mind is, the subtle level, the coarse levels, and we don't have time to go into it. But to answer this question, I believe we are born already with ideas and with labeling, except we don't have a language to use it. And it reminds me of a very interesting documentary I saw from a neuroscientist. They interviewed a neuroscientist who had a near-death experience. So he had meningitis and he fell into a coma, and his family had given up on him. They were already around his bed and mourning his imminent passing, basically. But he woke up from the coma, and he said previous to this experience he had during this coma, or his near-death experience, he thought the brain and the mind did not exist separately. He said, now I know they exist separately. I was a neuroscientist for the last, I don't know how many years. I was totally convinced they're the same, mind and brain, but now I know. And he talked about his experience. He said he was in this horrific kind of state, and he said he lost his language. He had forgotten his language. He said he later on, in retrospect, he became aware he had no words, he had no language to use. He had lost that ability temporarily. But he was still aware of what was going on around him. And he knew it was different from his ordinary state. And so when he came back, I cannot recollect everything. You can Google it. It's very easy. It's on YouTube. I saw it on a YouTube document. It was a YouTube documentary. Sometimes I Google reincarnation or mind and brain, and they have all these incredible clips of documentaries that are put on there, and this was just this case study of this particular person. But the point was that he said, I know language to convey it, but it was scaring me. It was scary. So he had no words in that moment. He had lost the ability to use words, and he was still formulating thoughts. So I think that is an ongoing process. And that's why we take things from one life to the next. We don't need to relearn it. Certain things we just know how to do it. We don't need to learn. We can do them. And I believe it's because our consciousness goes from life to life, and this conceptual mind that imputes and labels, that goes on. And a lot of the information we forget, the coarser kind of information, but the subtler ones we take with us. So that's in response to the first question. So I don't think there's a first moment, but then of course it becomes more refined. Our refined use of language as humans in the past life, if that's what we were in the immediate life, we forget that, right? A lot of it is forgotten, most of it is forgotten, but then we can relearn it as children. Yeah, but in between, we're still thinking, we're still aware, etc. And then the next question is, in relation to the existence of an object, does an object come into existence when it's first labeled by any sentient being? Once it is so labeled, whether or not other sentient beings impute it, it exists. Is this a right understanding? Okay. So I've kind of touched this question, but I still, it's not completely what I said, so I still feel like it's important to go into it. So once it is labeled, and I'm not saying labeling a snake on a rope. That's not correct labeling. But it's like, as even on your own, if you've done so, you determine this is a snake, that is the basic of imputation. These are the characteristics of a snake, so I call it a snake, or I refer to it, even if you don't have a word, but we actually categorize reality. Those are snakes, those are these, this is dangerous, this is, I mean, even animals do it. They can differentiate between certain plants that are harmful and other plants that are not harmful. I mean, dogs and cats, they learn. You're not allowed to go on the sofa. You get whipped or whatever. So they can learn danger, okay? Or don't do it when your owner is around, as our cat would do. It'd have like a spot of care hat, but when we came in, it was never on the sofa. It's just this little spot I think the cat was not aware of. So this cat knew before it would always go on the sofa, but later on it learned when we were around, it should not be caught on the sofa. So it would just do it secretly. So basically, that is labeling. Oh, I get a whipping, or I get shouted at if I do such. So being able to make sense, right? So we do label. And once you've labeled good or bad, and that is the basis of imputation, there's a consistency, and so we say it exists as such. Yes, it exists, right? Yeah. But we're not making up things here. It's like, we're not saying one day the Buddha is bad and the Buddha is good, and it's like there is a certain consistency. We don't say this is a car one day and the next day we call it a table, right? Because we associate these words, those symbols, with something specific. We label it on the basis of imputation, right? Okay, is this does that help? Right? And then the next question is very important. Basically, so with regard to non-existences, so what does therefore exist and what does not exist? Even on a conventional level, how do we determine? If nothing exists independently and phenomena are merely labeled, can we still talk about something existing conventionally and something not existing conventionally? So that's an important question. So when they talk about sky flowers, not a flower. It's not a flower you throw up and so it's in the sky and therefore you call it a sky flower. No, it's a flower that grows in the sky. Do we have those? No. So this is one example they give. There's no sky flower. Maybe another example that's more contemporary. We don't think about those, but there are no flying cows. Thanks God, because they poo in a nasty way. Never mind. So, but the point is, right now, I mean, there may be a mutation one day, but right now we don't have flying cows and we don't have, certain things just don't exist. Donald Trump just does not exist on my table. Thanks God. He's not. So there's certain things that just don't exist. And how do we determine? Well, what is the basis of imputation for Donald Trump? What is the basis of imputation for a flying cow? Right? What would that mean if it existed? And if we cannot perceive it because it doesn't make sense, I mean, the weight of a cow, what kind of wings would that be? Right? I mean, not that it's impossible, but right now, there's not an object to be found on this planet that can be called a cow, has all the characteristics we associate with a cow, and that's flying around. Right? So at this point in time, we say it doesn't exist. So we basically see, is there any awareness that deals with the conventional level? Right? If it's contradicted by such an awareness, right, then it cannot exist. Yeah? So a snake body being a snake exists. A rope being a snake doesn't exist. Okay? So there are plenty of examples. They give the example of a blue snow mountain. A snow mountain is white. Of course, not independently, you need light at least. But there is no blue snow mountain, so when a white snow mountain appears to be blue due to the lightning, right, due to the light, then we would say that's a wrong consciousness. Because white is the color of snow, it's actually white is not seen as a color. So therefore, usually it is perceived with that particular whiteness, and if it's seen as blue, it's a wrong consciousness. Yeah. All right. But it's a little bit difficult because the moment you go into the ultimate, things start disappearing. So on a level when you start really looking for the white snow mountain, even that disappears. Where's the white within the white snow mountain? So actually, the conventional is without analyzing. Without analyzing, where's the snow mountain in the snow mountain? If you just, according to appearances, go like, okay, this is a snow mountain, this is a car, this is such and such, that is the conventional. But the moment you dig deeper, where's the car within the car? Of course, things start to disappear, and you enter the ultimate level. There's been a question about that with regard to the ultimate and the conventional. So here I may as well address it. It says, how do we live in a world of conventional truth once we know the ultimate truth? Good question, right? How do we live in a conventional world within knowing the ultimate truth? Well, we continue to live in the normal way in such that we understand phenomena have always lacked inherent existence. The ultimate truth has always been there. We just didn't perceive it. In fact, if phenomena existed inherently, intrinsically, the way they appear, they couldn't interact with other things. They couldn't interact. They would be totally independently and in and of themselves a table, for instance, without needing anything else to become a table or to be a table. That's bizarre. That's bizarre, isn't it? So such a table couldn't exist. It's only because it doesn't exist inherently that it can be a table. So in the Heart Sutra it says, form is empty, emptiness is form. So this form here means the body, as an example. It just takes an example. This body doesn't exist inherently. And because it doesn't exist inherently, it can be a body. Emptiness as form is really just saying, because it is empty of independent existence, therefore it can exist as a body. It can change. It can affect other things. It can be affected. Right? It can be labeled as something. If it were intrinsically existent, it wouldn't depend on anything, and it could not interact with anything. It'll just be this isolated thing that would either always be there or never be there. Either always be there means it would not arise from independence on causes and conditions. So either it would never be there because it wouldn't arise from causes and conditions, or it would always be there because it doesn't need causes and conditions to come into existence. So here we just need to understand that the conventional, you know this expression, it's two sides of a coin. Two sides of a coin. The two sides of the coin are not the same, but they're just different parts of the same object. So likewise, the ultimate level and the conventional level, in other words, the fact that phenomena exist interdependently, that is the conventional level, and the fact that they don't exist inherently, that's the ultimate level. They're just two perspectives, which are complementary and not contradictory. Right? They're just looking at it from a different angle, and they're both true. They're both truth, in the sense that they're both levels of existence. They're both, well, the conventional truth is not described as a truth, but that's for a different reason. Never mind, I don't want to go into this, but they're still both existent. Conventional existence exists, and ultimate existence does too. Just different perspectives. And They support each other. Because phenomena exist interdependently, they lack inherent existence. Because they lack inherent existence, they exist interdependently. Right? Okay. Anyway, this question, we're done with. Then, we are commonly told that we should do good, be charitable, in order to accumulate good merits. This seems to be an act with condition attached. How do we cultivate this habit without such a motive, such selfish motive attached to it? That's a good question. I addressed it actually, I think yesterday, but I still want to go into it again. There are two reasons for accumulating merit. Selfish reasons and for the benefit of others. I don't necessarily, when I do something positive, need to have the sense, I want to accumulate merit for my benefit. No, because once I've reached a level where I really want to become a Buddha, okay, let me say this much. This is maybe misunderstood. Sometimes it's misunderstood. When we want to become a Buddha, this motivation is compared to the wish to have water and the wish to have a cup. Okay, when you want to have water, you're really thirsty, you want to have water. You also wish for a glass. Why? Because in order to be able to drink the water, you need a vessel such as a glass. So you can wish for both. You wish for water and you wish for a glass. But what is your main wish? Water. You want the water. So similarly with bodhicitta, you wish to become a Buddha is only like the wish for the glass. Your main wish is to bring lasting happiness to all sentient beings. You really, for whatever, there are so many different reasons for why it makes sense to wish for all sentient beings to have happiness. This is your real wish. And then, that's like the wish for water. That's what you want. You want to bring lasting happiness to all sentient beings. Because you have the opportunity, because sentient beings have been kind to you, because sentient beings are just like us. And if I can bring this about, if this is possible, then I want to make sentient beings happy. So, I want water, I want sentient beings to be happy. That's my main wish. And I wish for Buddhahood because that's like the glass. If becoming a crocodile were the way to bring happiness to all sentient beings, I would want to be a crocodile. But it's just not being a crocodile that helps me to take all sentient beings to Buddhahood, so I wish to be a Buddha. So really, this needs to be understood. The main goal, why a bodhisattva wants to become a Buddha, is because they just want to bring lasting happiness to sentient beings. And to bring lasting happiness to sentient beings, if I want that, my mind needs to change. And merit, positive karma, helps me to change this mind. Positive actions, basically. Positive karma is just another word. Merit is just another word for positive actions of body, speech, and mind. Positive actions of body, speech, and mind help my mind to transform. And if I do it for the benefit of other sentient beings, I want merit for them. If you're a bodhisattva, you eat for others. You sleep for others. You eat good food for others because you need a long life to be around long enough to benefit others. You need a healthy life to be strong enough to work for others. You need to sleep well to be rested well enough for others. You need to accumulate merit to be well enough for others. Everything is done for the welfare of others. Others and no one else. And the side effect is incredible happiness. But you don't care about that either. It's not important. So that is the determination of a bodhisattva. Look at His Holiness. Well, it's difficult to really know what His Holiness does from day to day, but from some of the documentaries, it's only for others. I need some time for myself. No, I don't think His Holiness needs some time for himself, except to meditate further and, to be an example to others. It's all just for the benefit of others. And now these beings around. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is a very good example. I know first-hand experience, Lama Zopa Rinpoche does not sleep. You cannot fake it. You cannot fake it, stay up a whole night and be like as if nothing happened. And I've seen him in Tushita. He gave us a teaching the whole night until 5 o'clock. He told us to rest and then continue with his teachings. And we were like, okay, Rinpoche. We went, had some coffee, came back. And Rinpoche was as fit as a fiddle. I mean, no difference. And then he came on teaching, and then he stopped the teachings, and he went to see all these people and to see them off, meditators around Tushita, and he ran there and he ran here. And I, with my friends, we had gone through the whole night, and we were like, oh. It was 4 o'clock. And then Rinpoche left. You cannot fake this, like no way. Rinpoche doesn't sleep. I believe, and I'm not sure about this, but Rinpoche uses subtler levels of consciousness because of his meditation, because of his high level of realization. Therefore, when we sleep, we need to access those subtler levels, and we can only do it when we sleep. That's when they come through. So anyway, that's just, but you see, Rinpoche has trained himself so that he's 24 hours available. I mean, these 8 hours, what a waste, to be honest, right? How many hours we sleep? 6 to 8 hours? It's such a waste of just lying there, not doing anything. If you want to benefit all sentient beings, you meditate so that you reduce your sleep. So you can be there 24 hours, literally. That's what they do. That's what they do just for others. So therefore you accumulate merit for others. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is always about accumulating merit for others. If he's not yet a Buddha, he does so to become one very quickly. And if he's already one, he shows us how to do it. Right? That's it. But we start where we are. We start where we are. When we start, we're not Lama Zopa Rinpoche. We're not like His Holiness, right? I know it sounds ridiculous to even say that. So, we are concerned for ourselves. We have strong self-grasping. Let's not ignore the self-grasping mind. Work with it. Don't work against it. If you work against your self-grasping mind, you're suppressing it, and you make sure it comes even stronger. This is why, when I see monks and nuns, in particular Western monks and nuns, misbehaving, initially I was frustrated. Now I know we come from a culture, not like you. You're lucky. You come from a culture where Buddhism, or where these ideas, don't even need to call them Buddhism, where these ideas of subduing the mind, being kind, actions have consequences, are part of your culture. I come from a country where being selfish is being clever. We're being, it's taught in school, it's being clever. Actions have consequences? Well, only if you get caught. So, therefore, coming from such a culture, it's much harder for us. So we are really having a huge space suit, right? So then we overdo very easily. And therefore, sometimes Western monks and nuns, they behave really aggressively. But I know, actually, when I get to know them, they try so hard, and they try too hard to suppress their self-grasping, and then they become stronger, they become aggressive, and it's very difficult. So actually, there should be an object of compassion, and we just need to understand they're just trying too hard, not going with their self-grasping mind. So initially, you are wisely selfish, right? We are selfish, we cannot suppress that, but be wisely selfish. If I'm aggressive, if I'm nasty, I'm not having lots of friends, right? So I start off with that. And then I take it to a further level. Well, I don't have many friends, and also how do the other people feel? And slowly I can expand it. Initially I do it for myself. But then slowly I learn to expand it. So I first I just do it for myself, then maybe I do it for my family, then I do it for, and slowly I learn as you keep doing it until you're ready to say, I do it for others. I don't care. I dedicate all my virtue to others. If I could dedicate it, I'd give it to others. But that's gradual, and you cannot force it. And you need to recognize when you go, oh, no, I can't do it. Then don't do it. By no means. Don't force yourself. Do what you can do. Right? Yeah? And take it from there. So therefore, initially we're told about karma. It helps it's good. Okay? We want something back. Until we're ready to say, I don't care. I just do it because it benefits others. So it's a step-by-step procedure. Does that make sense? Yeah? So initially we work with the self-grasping mind. But you get used to, you'll accustom yourself, you habituate yourself until some point you don't need it and you won't do it any longer. It's not important. You just do it because it's the right thing to do. Okay, wait, is that the right piece? Yeah. So you start off with this and then you continue until you're ready to let it go. How do we live in a world of conventional truth? Once we know the ultimate truth. So we can live in both worlds. And so the Buddha, okay, this is something excellent. That just reminds me of something excellent Geshe Kelsang Wangmo-la once said. In respect to this, so the conventional truth, the conventional world versus the ultimate world. It's a funny story. Okay, I tell you the funny version. I thought Geshe Kelsang Rinpoche, I was initially when I heard of him, I thought, oh no, the movie Lama, so degenerate. So I was very like, I was very arrogant, just to put it short. I mean, in brief words. So I thought he was just a really degenerate kind of just a lama doing movies. And I used to teach some students every year that came from Emory University, and we took them to beer to have an audience with Rinpoche. So someone organized it. And I just went along. I was still curious, but in my mind I was like, the movie Lama. And anyway, so we went in there. I was totally arrogant. And Rinpoche started talking. And one of the first things he said was, the Buddha diluted the teachings. And I was like, yeah, right, the movie Lama. Of course he would say that. But then he said something I never forget. And in that moment I knew, wow, Geshe Kelsang Rinpoche is really amazing. And from everything else he said, it was like, he's truly amazing. And I never changed my mind about him. But he said, the Buddha diluted the teachings. He said, he taught something that is beyond words. The truth, ultimate reality. Actually, you can't put it in words. Every word is limited. Every word we use suggests inherent existence. So talking of the lack of inherent existence, when we hear the word, it seems to suggest some solid lack of inherent existence. In other words, a very concrete emptiness, which seems to exist inherently. Right? But what can he do? All he can do is use words we already use and get as close as is possible. So he said the Buddha was like someone who sprays paint on a laser beam. Right? If you have a laser, you can't see the laser beam, but you can spray paint on it to kind of know, you can get as close as you can. So the paint is not the laser beam, but the paint is the word we use to refer to something that is actually beyond words. But that's the only means we have. So that is the conventional, our world. In fact, I believe after this teaching, it gave me so much, I never forgot. And you can tell I told the story so many times, I'm very good at telling it, although it's many years ago. But the point is here that the Buddha used the conventional ideas that were existent in India at that time. This is why the language is so strange. Because it was the language that was used 2,600 years ago by the philosophers at that time, which has changed in the meantime, which is why we have to learn the language again. I believe if Buddha Shakyamuni came now and were to introduce Buddhism anew, he would use a different language. He would use atoms and molecules and words we're most familiar with, ideas we're most familiar with. But the Buddha came 2,600 years ago. We still have the teachings, so we just learn it together with the words. But in the end, it's like the Buddha sprayed paint on the laser beam. In the fact, he diluted the teachings in that, not literally, of course, but he used a language that falls short. Right? And this is also what is said again in the Mula Madhyamika Karika. It says in here that it falls short, basically, that words cannot express it correctly. And our conceptual mind cannot perceive it correctly. Only direct experience. When we directly experience, that's when we perceive it correctly. So therefore, he taught according to our perception of the world. That is the conventional reality. And the Buddha perceives the conventional, he perceives what we perceive, right? Through what we perceive, the conventional world, that's what the Buddha perceives. And he perceives the ultimate truth. So it is indirectly through what we perceive, the Buddha perceives the conventional, and ultimately he perceives explicitly. Okay? So this is part of this one question here with regard to conventional and ultimate. Then there's another question here. Okay, we are made up of many parts, the body, and each part experiences causes and conditions. So does that mean that our body will experience millions of birth and death each moment in time? As such, diseases like cancer can occur in different parts of the body. Okay, with the parts of the cancer, it's not like that. I said this before. I said each moment in our life is the birth of one thing and the death of something else, right? So actually each moment, the past is gone and something new has arisen, which right away goes out of existence. So this constant change is really like each moment there's a new birth, like a new person, and then a death in that sense. But of course we don't call it birth and death, because the continuum of the body, of this body, and the continuum of this mind, they remain together. So what we call death is when the continuum of this body and this mind separate. Okay? So I'm not literally saying we're dying each moment. Okay? And so I don't see them as separate and then that we actually die each moment. But we can label death from a particular perspective. Okay, but we would still not go as far as saying we die each moment. If you want to say there's a death at certain intervals, what would you use? Falling asleep. Every night we fall asleep. Something similar happens to when we die. Except we wake up with the same continuum of this body, while when we wake up after death, we have a new body. Okay? Of course, our body has changed overnight, but still it's the same continuum. So therefore, if you want to talk about something similar to death and waking up, falling asleep and waking up, that would be death and rebirth. Yeah, or death and rebirth are similar to falling asleep and waking up in the next morning. Anyway, that is explained in certain tantric texts where you actually practice taking the sleep, taking your own death, making that part of your practice. But without going into that, I wouldn't say that each moment we experience a conventional birth and death, literally. And then diseases, cancer can occur in different parts of the body. Well, yeah, but they usually spread from one part to the next, unfortunately. And then, of course, the whole body is affected. So there's definitely a strong connection between. And they don't really go to another person, right? They're spread throughout one body, but they don't spread to another person's body, as it would be in the case of an infectious disease. So you would still talk of that entity, right? So on a conventional level, it is still one person versus another person. But the dividing lines between us are not as pronounced as they may seem. So with this question, I'm not sure I answered it in a way that's satisfactory, but I leave it because we have more questions here. So I apologize if it was not that clear, my answer. But the second part is, easier said than done. Putting yourself in others' shoes. Yeah. So true. Even if that is the case, our mind afflictions are not others' mind and afflictions. So we're not sure we're truly in others' shoes. That's true. I mean, there are different levels of this practice. I think the more advanced you are, the better you can do it. You even develop clairvoyant abilities of the mind, so that you can know another person's mind. But even in everyday life, we can train our mind to be more perceptive of others. There are different degrees where we can become more perceptive of others. You see, when you know people, and I'm sure you all know people who are very self-obsessed, okay? So people who are just I all the time. Have you ever noticed that everything seems to be about them? They're talking about me, right? They're talking about the weather. No, they're talking about me. So the stronger the sense of I, the stronger the sense everyone is talking about me. Everything is about me. So you can see how there's no space in the mind to perceive others. The stronger the sense I, everything is about me. And it's very painful. Those people suffer a lot. I know someone who's very self-obsessed, and in this case, in the case of this person, they suffer so much because this person assumes no one likes her, no one appreciates her. They're always talking bad about her. So it's like it's a terrible state. And she's not able to put herself into others' shoes because she's so busy with herself. But then there are others that I know, they're a lot towards others. They're not so busy with themselves. And they're very perceptive when it comes to others. Because they're not so busy with themselves, they can pay better attention. And the better you pay attention, the more perceptive you become. I mean, look at Chinese doctors. They pay attention to your pulse. And to me, it's like, I can take your pulse or your pulse. To me, it's no difference. But a Chinese doctor learns to differentiate, or a Tibetan doctor learns to differentiate between the pulses. They become perceptive because they pay attention. Because they have a mind that has the ability to know. So therefore, as you keep doing it, as the self-cherishing becomes less, you become more perceptive of others. And you get a sense, at least, what they're thinking, where they're coming from, why they're angry, right? We can get a sense they're very angry because they're unhappy. Or they're very arrogant because they're actually very insecure. So they're kind of pretending they're like special and so forth. So after a while, you pick it up. And you can really generate compassion because in the end, these afflictions always come from a place of misperceptions. And they're really harming themselves. So compassion becomes possible no matter how annoying the person is. So you learn to become more perceptive because you're less busy with I, me, and mine. And you just learn it. It becomes a process of learning. And in part of meditations, I believe 100% that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that Dalai Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that they have clairvoyant abilities. Either there are some really weird coincidences, right? I'll give you one little example. I had one teacher called Kitty Center Rinpoche. I was very, very close to him. As in, I would always go to see him. He was so kind to me. And unfortunately, he has passed away. But I would always ask him, especially when I had visa issues. Because I tried to make a decision, but there I just didn't know. Should I go here? Should I go there? I needed to get a visa every 5 years for India. So one time I asked him, I said, I need to go to Nepal to get a student visa. When should I go? And Rinpoche said, you go tonight. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go. It's hot. It was like really hot May. And at that time, I couldn't afford the plane or anything, so I had to take the bus and the train and the bus again. I didn't want to go. And Rinpoche said, you want the visa? You go tonight. and you recite such and such mantra. So I went ahead. I did it. I went there. I got the student visa. I came back, and Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. Borders closed. No more visas. And I don't think Rinpoche had anything to do with the assassination, so... By the way. So Rinpoche knew. Rinpoche, how could you tell me? He knew. And he told me I made the right decision because when I got back, that was it. And they have not been giving student visas since that time. I must have been one of the last on that list. And there are many examples. This is just one of the more potent ones. And so, again, they develop this ability because they let go of like, I, me, and mine. They can actually know other situations around them, other people's minds, right? They become perceptive of it. As a Chinese doctor becomes perceptive of the pulse and of other things. It's just this moving away from I. So then putting yourself in another person's shoes becomes easier. Easier and easier and easier as you keep doing it, right? Okay? So it doesn't seem fair. When it's most necessary, we can't do it. But yeah, it's like our self-grasping is in the way to doing it, but through practice it becomes easier. So we don't know, but we can assume. And I don't think we're always wrong. Okay. Another question, how would you recommend the best way to teach the Dharma to younger children that are younger than 12? Must they go through the material world and suffering to appreciate the Dharma when their minds are capable of understanding? No. I mean, they will. Eventually, living in this world, I mean, I think not giving them any material things, that would not make sense. So they still have to work in this world, live in this world. I think the best answer to this question you find in the advice by His Holiness the Dalai Lama about how to introduce kindness and love and mindfulness and so forth in schools. And there's a lot of research that has been done. His Holiness with Emory University, so in the US, Emory University has been very active. They have one Geshe, who is amazing. He's no longer a monk, but as a layperson, he's very, very, very active in putting into practice His Holiness's advice. And through Emory University, a lot of schools have adopted lessons in kindness, in like putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Children are very good at that, by the way. As in like trying to understand the other children, etc. So it's very beautiful. So you can read up on it and on the results in particular of what they've used. They've used certain techniques. So you could basically Google how to apply His Holiness's secular ethics to the school. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've come up with some kind of description that you could use. And I remember when I was in Germany, I had to talk about this and I Googled it. Now I forgot about it, but I Googled all the results that I had about children being more self-confident, being kinder to each other, less bullying, just being kind to others and making children aware of the needs of others. What you don't want to be done to yourself, don't do to others. How would you feel if you did such and such? And they're really able, if they're pushed in that or guided in that direction, they're able to do it. It's very beautiful with children. They come up with great ideas. Yeah, so if you read about this, I'm sure whoever asked the question, you'll get some incentives on introducing kindness, love, dependent arising, impermanence, right? Just some of those ideas and make them relevant to their own lives, so to bring more love and more understanding into their lives. Yeah, give them a lot for their future. So, and just say material is material. We need certain things, but they're not enough to be happy. So to really get them to understand that there's more than that, and that there's so much suffering around, and that we have personal responsibility to leave this world a better place. Right? Okay. So I think it's an important question. And then the last question is, this was the last piece of paper I was given. So in the Precious Garland, or Ratnavali by Nagarjuna, it says for an effect to take place, for a result to come into existence, the preceding cause has to cease, has to go out of existence. But then the question is, but this tree is still there when the flower blooms. Without the tree, there cannot be a flower. Okay? If the tree is the cause, the flower is the effect. Both exist at the same time. How do we make sense of that statement? I'll take it further. We say fire is the cause of smoke. So, but smoke and fire exist at the same time. You have a fire there and you have smoke billowing. So, there's a contradiction. The smoke is the result of the fire, but they exist at the same time. Okay, the philosopher's view. Can you answer that question? Don't be shy. Can you answer it? Anyone? Yes? Oh, sorry. Can you pass on the microphone? He's just raised his hand. Yeah. So the question is with the flower and the tree as well as with the fire and the smoke. Yes? Smoke of this moment. Yeah. Is it switched on? Yeah, it's gone.
The smoke of this moment comes from the fire of one moment ago. And when the smoke of this moment has arisen, the fire of the last moment has disintegrated.
Okay.
And the fire of the last moment
flower?
is...
The flower and the tree. So I just repeat what he said. So the smoke that you see right now, it is not the result of the fire you see right now, but from an earlier moment of fire that is no longer there. And the fire you see right now is the cause of smoke that arises a moment later. So there's the cause, there's the result. There's the cause, there's the result. But because the fire stays around for some time, it seems that the cause and the effect exist at the same time. But actually those two that exist at the same time do not relate to each other as one being the cause of the other. Yes, and then the flower and the tree?
Well, it is true that we say that the tree is the cause of the flower.
Yes.
But if you trace where the flower actually comes from, it comes from one part of the tree, and that part of the tree is actually gone for when the flower arises.
Yeah. So first you had a tree without a flower. That tree without the flower, that gave rise to the flower. Then the tree goes on to exist when the flower is there. But that tree that exists at the same time as that flower, that later tree is not the cause of that flower. It was the earlier tree. You see? But it's really difficult to put it into words. The earlier tree that was there before the flower was there is the cause of the flower. Since there is a time when there is no flower but a tree, for the sake of convenience we say tree gives rise to flower. Since there's a small moment when there's only fire and then there's smoke, we say fire gives rise to smoke. So basically, what exists together does not have a cause-effect relationship. Great, did all the questions. Very good questions. The Landa Master Course. And the Landa Master Course, very good. Very good, excellent.